Amen. All right. Well, before we get to our sermon today, we are going to have a presentation from one of our ministry partners, and I want to give a little bit of a personal connection. If you've been here for a Gideon Sunday, you may have seen this before, but something that is never really too far away from me is something that my great-grandfather got before he deployed to the Pacific in World War II as an enlisted man in the United States Navy. This is his Gideon Bible. And there is, you can see it's dusty. It's got stains on it. I wonder what beach, what grit is in this. But this went with him through the Pacific as his connection to the living God. Also, when I was a kid, I was privileged on one hand to grow up in the church, but my father died when I was in 6th grade, and that wrecked, that just changed everything. And so we were not really in church, and I could feel that what I was missing in that moment. There was one day coming down the steps of Turner Middle School in Berthoud, Colorado, when I was in 7th grade. A man was standing at the end of the steps there, and I'd recognized him because he was a part of this church in this small town in northern Colorado that I grew up in, and he handed me a Gideon Bible as I was coming down the steps, and I didn't want it at first, but then when he handed it to me, I walked all the way home with it, wondering what I was going to do with it, and it's interesting that what do you do with books? You read them, right? So what was trying to figure out what I was going to do with it. I read it, and it was as a 7th grader with that Gideon Bible that I realized that I could have a faith of my own, and that really is the entry point to my walk with Jesus. And so I am a pastor because of my walk with Jesus, but that started with a Gideon Bible. And so we're going to have our Gideon representative come on up and give us an update on what they've got going on. Our very own, straight from what I refer to as Ranchers Row over here. This is Easy Grantham. Would you welcome him as he gets to talk to us about the Gideons?
Thank you, Adam, and I want to thank this church. They've always been very supportive of the Gideons. You know, folks, we have a rich heritage here in Montana with the Gideons. Some of you may already know this. Now, the Gideons were founded back in 1899, 125 odd years ago, by a couple of traveling salesmen. But the very first Gideon Bibles that were placed in a hotel or motel anywhere in the world were placed in Montana, the Superior Hotel, Superior, Montana. And there's a plaque on the wall over there. I believe it's an auto parts store now, but that's where it all started. But we've come a long ways. Today we're in over 200 countries and passing out scriptures this year, somewhere between 60 and 70 million Bibles will be given out. Now, all the funds to do that come from evangelical churches like yourselves, like ourselves, and the Gideons themselves pay for all administrative costs. So if you decide to give some money to the Gideons, 100% goes to buy Bibles. A couple of years ago, I heard of an interesting study that was done to a large group of older people in my age group. They're in the last part of our lives. And they asked them what their greatest fear was. They were expecting that it would be one of two things, either that they'd run out of money before they passed away, or that their health would fail and they'd be incapacitated. Ironically, or surprisingly, the greatest fear that came out on that was called lack of significance. They either weren't significant, they felt, to anyone in their lives, or they hadn't done anything significant in their life. And that triggered the thoughts in my own mind of what denotes significance. And to me, the answer would be something that has eternal value. Now, that can take many forms, I know that. Certainly Pastor Adam is leading a significant life. But anything you do for the Lord, raising godly families, whatever, yeah, I think that's all significant if it has eternal value, and most of it does. Sometimes just the act of giving a Bible to somebody triggers a significant event, both for the giver and for the receiver. I'm going to give you just a couple of brief examples of that. A lady by the name of Terry Hensley was, I imagine she's retired by now, but she was a mail carrier out here at Shepherd. And she came to the Gideons and told this story. She said she was at a low point in her life. She had a divorce and nothing was going right in her life, and she decided to end it all. In fact, she was in the closet in her house with a gun to her head, and she wasn't a Christian at that point, but she said, God, if there's any reason I shouldn't go ahead and pull the trigger, let me know. And at that moment, her son arrived home and came through the front door there from school. He said, Mommy, look what I got. And he had one of those small testaments like Adam received. You know, she wasn't going to kill herself in front of her son, so she came out. They started reading the Bible, and she says, that's what started my faith journey. And she's spoken at Gideon conventions around telling her story. Another is a man by the name of Victor. He was a gentleman from Ukraine. Now, in Ukraine, prior to the war, you're all familiar with the Russian-Ukraine thing that's going on, the war. And at the start of the war, there were roughly 47 million people there in the population. When it got started and the bombing started and whatever, a lot of them fled. But they didn't just rush into the other countries, into the forest or something. They had to go through a processing center. And one of the processing centers there, we got word back early on from one of the processing centers in Europe that 80,000 Bibles had been given out to these people who'd lost everything. But back to Victor. Victor decided, he was a member of the Gideons there, and as I stated, there were 47 million people. But to date, when the war started, the Gideons had already given out, over the years, 46 million Bibles. And today they're still doing that. Of course, the war's going on. But Victor felt that he was called to join the army, but also that he was called as a Gideon to go to the front lines, give out the Gideon Bibles, and pray with the folks to receive Christ. He felt that he was called to one specific person. Now, I don't know whether that person, I don't know who it could have been, the next Billy Graham or whatever, but one specific person. And he went off and did not only that, but gave out a lot of them. He came back, was on leave at Christmas time, told his local church that he felt that he had, in fact, found the one person he was called to, but that he'd also shared with a lot of people. So 51 years old, 2 weeks later, he went back and was killed. At his funeral, there was word come back from the front lines of all these people that he had given a Gideon Bible to, like Adam showed, and had led them to the Lord. Now, many of those people probably dead by now, too. But God's word just doesn't come back void. Another, and one that I'm personally familiar with, my last example, I guess, and I could go on examples all day, but some years ago, I was able to go with a group of Gideons from 14 different countries, meet up with the local Gideons in Ghana, Africa. And in Ghana, Africa, a very poor country, but they speak 56 different dialects. In order to do business, they have to have an official language, and that happens to be English. And this is true in a lot of these third world countries. So look at how God's working. So there we were able to go right into the schools. We could go into the classrooms. They usually called a huge assembly, lots of children, high birth rate, high death rate over there, very poor country. But we could preach to them. We gave them a Bible, went through the plan of salvation. It's in the back, and asked them who wanted to accept the Lord. We gave out over 300,000 Bibles there in 2 weeks, and lots of professions of faith. Now, you folks, somebody in this room may well have bought those Bibles. And certainly somebody could have bought the ones that Victor was using. But when we got back, we also got a lot of feedback from the local Gideons, and one was from a letter from a Muslim student called Ali Muhammad. Now, in Ghana, there's about 25% of the people are Muslims, and then there's another 10% or so that are in the occult, what we would call witchcraft or whatever. But Ali Muhammad was a Muslim student, and even the Muslim schools would let us in. Now, we couldn't preach there or go through the plan of salvation, but there were no school books there to teach English. So they would take these and they would teach English out of them. Now, what do you think, folks? I bet they learned more than English, huh? But Ali Muhammad wrote back that he had got one at a Muslim school or somewhere there when we were there, and he started reading it at night. He didn't want to let his parents know because that would have been bad, you know. He may have been dead by now if he'd have told them to start with. But in any event, he read through that Bible and decided to accept Christ. But the story doesn't stop there. You see, Ali Muhammad had 11 brothers and sisters, and one by one, that one Bible for $1.50, like Adam held up, that somebody in this room may have bought, led 11 of those brothers and sisters to the Lord. Guess what? The story doesn't stop there. Because his parents eventually found out what was going on. They too became Christians, and his father had been what we would call a witch doctor. So that's just an example how God's word doesn't stop. I bet that influence is still going on because those kids are grown up now, have their own Christian families, I guess. I got a picture of Victor here, the Ukraine guy, if anybody wants to see it later. But as I stated, I could go on forever. Over there, the schools are open. It's a little harder here, but I'll tell you, anybody that has kids here, children or grandchildren in the Lockwood School, they are one of the most open to us and very helpful. So we're very, very blessed here in this community. I'm going to stop now. My brother Larry, ours fellow Gideon, is with me. We'll be at the back. If you want to buy some Bibles, you may well be triggering a significant event, and you'll find out when you get to heaven just what that amounted to. But as I stated, 100% will go to buy Bibles. And thank you once again, Pastor, for allowing us here. By the way, if any of you want to think about joining the Gideons, we're always looking for new members. You can talk to Larry, myself, or Pastor, and we'll tell you about it. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, is that better? There we go. Thank you. All right. I could feel something. I was getting shocked in my back, and I couldn't, it was making it hard to think. And so now that is, all right, now that is resolved, we can get back at it. So we're in the Sermon on the Mount, and Jesus is about to get deeply personal. He's going to be moving beneath what we do, moving beneath our behavior. He's going to begin addressing the things that shape us. But before we move too quickly into those things, into the specifics, into anger, lust, and desire and speech, we need to notice a pattern that's going to emerge in the text. Over and over again, as we read this, Jesus is going to say, "You have heard it said, but I say to you." You have heard it said. So those gathered on the hillside that are talking, or that are hearing this greatest sermon ever preached, they've heard teachings about all of these things. They've heard teachings about anger. They've heard teachings about lust, about ways to talk. They've heard all of this before. They've heard it, though, from the Torah. They've heard it from the law, the holy scriptures that held up their faith in the moment. But I say to you, Jesus is not arguing with the law. He's not arguing with Moses. He's not dismissing the prophets. He's not about to lower the standard. What he's doing is claiming authority over the standard. You've heard it said, and it's true that they have. But I say to you, Jesus is claiming authority over the standard. Now, just a few verses earlier than the passages that we're going to deal with today, Jesus said that he did not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it. And that word matters. The word fulfill matters. Fulfill doesn't mean discard. He's not discarding anything. He's not discarding the law. It means bring to completion. Bring to the intended depth. Reveal what we were always aiming at in the first place. See, the law addressed behavior, and right behavior is needed in order for relationships to function. That's just a reality. That's the truth. The law actually makes a lot of sense if we think about it. I'd submit to you that murdering each other would damage our relationships. We could agree with that, right? And so there is an inherent wisdom in the law. Murdering each other would make our relationships difficult. The law addressed behavior, and the law is sensible in maintaining community order. But Jesus is fulfilling the law. Jesus is addressing the heart from which behavior flows. Now, for some people, especially if you're a person like me, that can actually be kind of crushing. Reading the passages that we're going to read today can be crushing. Mark Twain once wrote about a dream that he had, a reoccurring dream that Mark Twain would have. He would dream that the Bible was falling on him, that it would land on him, and it pressed in on him with such crushing weight that it would kill him. Now, for many, the passages that we're going to read today, the Sermon on the Mount, feels like that. It feels like Jesus has taken an already difficult standard and then made it worse. But that's not what's happening. Jesus is not adding weight. He's exposing root. There's something that we all know, even if we don't say it out loud, even if we don't recognize it together all the time. Knowing the right thing does not change us. Can I get an amen from that? Knowing the right thing does not change us. I know that I should not be thinking about creating memes to show on a Sunday morning about an eagle standing on a goose. I know better. I have all the information I need. And it changes nothing. Knowing the right thing is not where we win the ball game. Having the information is not the end of the road. Now, most of us don't struggle because we lack information. We struggle because something deeper is forming our desires, forming our reactions, and forming our instincts. Now, behavior modification can work for a bit. We can modify behavior for a while, But eventually, whatever lives in the heart leaks out. Whatever is inside leaks out. It doesn't matter how hard we try to change behavior, what is in the heart will leak out. Stress reveals it. Pressure exposes it. Conflict, anybody ever had any conflict? Conflict brings it to the surface. So instead of tightening the rules, Jesus goes to the source. He is fulfilling what God promised through the prophet Jeremiah when the prophet spoke, I will put my law within them and I will write it on their hearts. That's what we're dealing with. The law matters. The Ten Commandments matter. They mattered then, they still matter today. But what Jesus is doing is showing us that the law was never designed to heal the heart. What Jesus is offering us is not a more strict righteousness. What he's offering us is a real righteousness that comes from healing. That word righteousness also, we have to remember, does not mean anything about moral superiority. Righteousness means right relationship, being in right relationship, being aligned correctly, a life ordered correctly under God. Jesus is not raising the bar to overwhelm us. He's restoring order at the center. What we see here is that sin isn't merely rule breaking. Sin is a disorder of the heart. The kingdom Jesus brings is not a cosmetic kingdom, it's transformational. So what we're not hearing today is stricter righteousness. We're hearing real righteousness. What this word actually means, the kind of righteousness that heals us from the inside out. So we're going to start the journey together in Matthew 5, verses 21 through 26. You have heard that our ancestors were told, you must not murder. If you commit murder, you are subject to judgment. But I say, if you are even angry with someone, you are subject to judgment. If you call someone an idiot, that's the word raka, you are in danger of being brought before the court. And if you curse someone, you are in danger of the fires of hell. So if you are presenting a sacrifice at the altar in the temple and you suddenly remember that someone has something against you, leave your sacrifice there at the altar, go and be reconciled to that person. Then come and offer your sacrifice to God. When you are on the way to court with your adversary, settle your differences quickly. Otherwise, your accuser may hand you over to the judge, who will hand you over to an officer, and you will be thrown into prison. And if that happens, you surely won't be free again until you have paid the last penny. It's easy to see how this word can be crushing if we hear it through the voice of condemnation rather than a voice of conviction. A conviction always is, conviction is based in love. Now, Jesus begins with something that everyone in the crowd knew by heart. You must not commit murder. Again, this is a clear line. This is clear behavior. This is a clear boundary. The law protected life, and he's reminding the folks of that. He's reminding not only does the law protect life, but it restrains violence. This is about established order, and it makes sense. But then Jesus says, I say to you, and again, he's not correcting Moses. He's fulfilling the law by bringing it to the intended depth. The law said, do not take life. Jesus says, do not erode the dignity of life in your heart. If you're angry with someone, that starts to land when I read that. If you're angry with someone, Jesus is not flattening a moral trajectory. He's not trying to create a different moral category. He's not saying that the irritation equals homicide. But he is tracing the trajectory from anger to murder. Violence does not ever begin with action. Violence happens long before the action actually takes place. Violence begins with contempt. Now that word Jesus uses, raka, that is a word that those on the hillside hearing the word raka probably like, is a pastor allowed to say that? That this is not a word of mild frustration. This is one of the deepest insults that you could give in that culture. It means, and when I say it means so much more than this, but to try to get us into the area, it means empty-headed. It means worthless. It means definitely beneath me. And now we see the trajectory that shows us that there is a deeper disorder happening here. When we hold someone in contempt, we quietly diminish their worth. We strip them in our imagination of the dignity that comes from being made in the image of God. You think about our culture right now and the role that contempt is playing, stripping each other of the dignity that comes with the reality that we are made in the image of God. Contempt is the first step of violence. But it also, contempt, is relational violence. This is why Jesus uses a word here when he says the fires of hell. What he's talking about, he actually names the fires that he's talking about. He uses the word Gehenna. And this is an actual place that still is kind of a trash dump today. Gehenna. This is a burning valley outside of Jerusalem. And this, it describes what unchecked anger becomes. It burns, it consumes, it spreads. This is like the ongoing fire pit that's never actually put out, that folks would just take their trash to. And that still in the Middle East, you will see in many towns where this is really how they deal with their municipal waste, is they take it to the burning fire that never stops. When he talks about the burning fires of hell and Jesus uses Gehenna, he's talking, he probably could be in a place where he could point to the smoke and say, that right there, that's what your anger's like. This is a fire. All it does is it consumes. Everything you bring to it, it just consumes more and more. Everything that comes. That is what anger does. It breeds contempt, and the fire will never go out. Now here's where this becomes uncomfortable, if it hasn't become uncomfortable yet. It becomes uncomfortable because most of us would never commit physical violence. Now I know there's a moment where everyone has a breaking point. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about you don't go through your day committing physical violence. I feel reasonably confident for at least a few of you that's true. You don't go through your day committing physical violence. But many of us commit relational violence in our head. Many of us will rehearse arguments in our head. Many of us will relive conversations. Many of us will reply with like a slight that you know that they're not going to be able to, like they wouldn't have anything to say to that, and I just won the argument in my head. We construct internal courtrooms where we're always right and someone else is always wrong. Am I alone in this? Yeah, I know that. I do it. I know I do it, but this is something that this is what Jesus is talking about. Jesus is gently saying that's where disorder begins. And so if we have that going on right now, then we already have the invitation that's coming for ministry time. If we're already reliving conversations, if we are thinking through what we would say next, or if I had only said this, if we have that going on right now, we are moving down the line to that ministry time invitation. Jesus points out that this is where disorder begins. Because the kingdom he's bringing is not merely about restrained behavior, it's about restored relationships. Now, this is why he says something shocking. If you're at the altar, if you're at the place of worship, if you are worshiping, if you are here in church today, this is where it gets a little personal, right? And this is the difference between condemnation and conviction. Because the goal here isn't to change behavior, it's to form our hearts. If you are worshiping and you remember someone has something against you, stop. Leave. Reconcile. Why? Because fulfillment of the law is not ritual precision. Fulfillment of the law is being formed by the love of Christ and allowing that love to come out and act through us. This is relational wholeness. The law restrained murder, but Jesus is about restoring dignity. The law addressed external harm, but Jesus is addressing eternal and internal erosion. This is where righteousness becomes a little bit more clear. Righteousness, not about moral superiority, but right order under God. Now, in the kingdom, reconciliation takes precedence over religious performance because the kingdom is relational at its core. We can sing, we can serve, we can preach, but if contempt is taking root, something is disordered. And here's the grace in that. Jesus is not shaming anger. He's healing it. He's not exposing my heart as I'm preaching this and thinking about places where contempt is entering in. He's not exposing my heart to condemn it. He's exposing it so he can reorder it. Because anger, left unattended, like the fires of Gehenna, reshapes us. And so if we are on this journey talking about being formed, we have to pay attention to the things that are actually forming us. And anger will form us. Anger narrows compassion. Anger hardens the heart and hardens the spirit. It trains us towards separation rather than restoration. And Jesus loves us too much to leave us untouched. And now he goes a little bit deeper and a little bit more uncomfortable. Back to the scripture. Verse 27. You've heard the commandment that says you must not commit adultery. But I say anyone who has ever looked at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart. So if your eye, even your good eye, causes you to lust, gouge it out and throw it away. It's better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your hand, even your stronger hand, causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It's better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. You've heard the law that says a man can divorce his wife by merely giving her a written notice of divorce. But I say, a man who divorces his wife, unless she's been unfaithful, causes her to commit adultery. Anyone who marries a divorced woman also commits adultery. Well, that's a happy verse to follow up with. Jesus is moving from anger to lust and desire, and he begins the same way. You've heard it said, and he talks about the law. Don't commit adultery. And the command matters. The command protects covenant. It preserves family, and it restrains betrayal. That makes sense to us. But again, Jesus fulfills it by going beneath it. He's going beneath behavior, and he says, you have heard it said, but I say to you. And suddenly, he's not talking about behavior alone. He's talking about desire. Now, we have to tread carefully here because this is where many people begin to feel shame. But remember, we cannot separate the sermon from the preacher. We can't separate the words from the one saying them. Jesus is the one giving this sermon. So we have to remember who he is and what he's about. Jesus is not trying to embarrass the disciples. He's not trying to embarrass anyone because he knows in front of him are people that he's talking about. He's not looking to embarrass. He's not looking to shame. He's exposing areas where restoration is needed. Jesus goes to the root. Jesus is going to the internal movement that turns a person into an object. Lust at its core is not about attraction. We might think that it's about attraction, but lust actually has nothing to do with attraction. Lust, not about attraction, is about consumption. It's taking someone made in the image of God and reducing them to a means of gratification. This is not simply a sexual behavior or a sexual misbehavior. It's a distortion of what human beings were created for. Now, from the beginning, humans were made for communion. We know that. Communion with God, with one another. Covenant love is mutual, self-giving, honoring, and faithful. Lust is an inversion of that. It's taking instead of giving. It's consuming instead of covenanting. Possessing instead of honoring. This is why Jesus' language is so strong in this section. When he says, if your eye causes you to sin, tear it out, he's not advocating for self-harm. He's using a deliberate hyperbole to show us the seriousness of the disordered desire. He's saying this matters because desire, like anger, will train us. Desire, like anger, will form us. It shapes what we expect. Desire can shape what we normalize. Desire shapes how we see people. And when desire becomes detached from covenant, it fractures our integrity. Martin Luther once said that you cannot stop a bird from flying over your head, but you can stop it from building a nest in your hair. So what we're seeing here is that Jesus is not condemning noticing beauty. He's confronting sustained desire that builds nests, that lingers, that cultivates fantasies, and rehearses possession. Now here's where the fulfillment theme deepens. The law says don't break covenant. Don't let your heart drift away from covenant before your body ever moves. The law is restraining betrayal, and that makes sense. But Jesus is restoring faithfulness at the level of desire. That's what he's doing. This is not about tighter control. This is about restored love. Jesus does not want us to desire less. He's not looking for us to have less desire in our lives. He doesn't want less desire. He wants healed desire. Desire that moves towards intimacy instead of towards secrecy. Toward faithfulness instead of fragmentation. Toward communion instead of consumption. Suppressed desire does not disappear. Have you ever noticed that? Suppressed desire does not disappear. Suppressed desire goes underground. It mutates. Jesus is not offering a road to suppression. He's offering a road to transformation. Righteousness is not the absence of wrongdoing, it's the presence of right order. It's the heart so aligned with God that whatever we want begins to reflect what he wants for us. And this is hopeful because if anger is rooted in contempt, then lust is rooted in longing. The longing underneath lust is often a longing to be seen, to be known, to be valued, to be connected. Jesus does not shame longing. He restores it. He reorders it. He fulfills what the law aimed at. A people whose loves are rightly aligned. The last piece that Jesus has for us today, verse 33, you've also heard that our ancestors were told, you must not break your vows, you must carry out the vows that you make to the Lord. But I say, do not make any vows, do not say, by heaven, because heaven is God's throne. Do not say, by the earth, because the earth is his footstool. And do not say, by Jerusalem, for Jerusalem is the city of the great king. Do not even say, by my head, or you can't turn one hair white or black. Just say a simple yes, I will, or no, I won't. Anything beyond this is from the evil one. Might seem unrelated at first to talk about vows or an oath. But again, we're in this, you have also heard. The law spoke into this. In ancient Israel, an oath was serious. There were ways of binding words to God's names. The law regulated them to prevent a false swearing. But by the day of Jesus, something had happened. from the beginning of this behavior of swearing by God that would bind me to something, people had learned to manipulate the system. Anybody shocked by that? People learned to manipulate the system. They had learned that they could swear by heaven, and it sounds like they're swearing by God, but they're actually not. They learned different ways to say something to sound good, but actually not mean what they said. By the earth instead of the Lord's name. They're creating degrees of seriousness that they could, like this is to me, when I read this and I think about this, I go back to Christmas Story and the triple dog dare. Like there are degrees of stuff, like a regular dare, a double dare, a double dog dare. Like we've got different levels of severity here in the ways that we have an oath. In other words, this is about image management replacing integrity. Jesus says, you've heard it said, but I say to you, don't swear at all. Don't make swears. Don't make a vow. Don't make an oath. Just let your yes be yes. Just say it and mean it. Let your no be no. Again, not abolishing the law. He's fulfilling it. Now, the law did restrain perjury. You had to tell the truth. But what Jesus is doing is restoring trust. The law regulated speech, but Jesus is healing the heart from which that speech will flow. When a heart is fractured, words become inflated. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? My broken heart will inflate the things that I say. We exaggerate, we overpromise and underdeliver. We shade truth to protect our image or ourself. All of this is curating an image that we want to present. Why do we do this? Because trust has eroded in us and trust has eroded around us. In the kingdom, integrity replaces performance. A whole heart will produce simple speech. If anger is healed dignity and desire is healed love, then speech becomes healed truth. If I'm secure in who I am, if I know that my identity is actually what he says about me rather than what I say about me or what you might say about me, I don't need to exaggerate. I don't need to overpromise. I don't need to shade the truth. I can just say yes. And so all of this is tied back to identity. Now, notice what Jesus is doing across all three of these examples. He's using these three specific examples of all the different behavior things that he could choose from. He chooses these three in order to restore alignment. He's restoring alignment between what we feel and how we treat others. He's restoring alignment between our desire and how we honor covenant. He's restoring alignment in what we say and what is true. So righteousness is not moral escalation, it's integration. It's a life where the inside and the outside start to match each other. And this brings us back to last week, if you remember when we talked about salt and light. Salt and light are not sustained by volume. They're sustained by integrity. A visible life only carries weight if there's substance beneath it. If our speech requires constant reinforcement, we need oaths and qualifiers and disclaimers. And that's because something beneath the surface is unstable. But when the heart is healed, words become simple. Yes. No. No inflation. No manipulation. No performance. Just truth. And this is where hope enters. John in his gospel writes, when Christ appears, we will all be like him, for we will see him as he really is. That is the height of integrity. And that's also the future. That's the future that we will enjoy together, whole, integrated, without fragmentation. Jesus is forming us now for the life that we will fully live then. We're not going to be perfect overnight, but increasingly we will be aligned. increasingly we will be honest, and increasingly we will be whole. So here is our invitation today. Our invitation today is not about behavior management. It's not about trying harder. This isn't a sermon to tell you to clean yourself up. This is the moment where we get to become honest. We get to ask ourselves this week, what pattern keeps showing up in my heart? Is it resentment? Is it comparison? Is it distraction? Is it secrecy? Maybe dishonesty. Whether that's with others or even with ourselves. Paying attention to these things help us to notice what has formed us. And then we get to return to a practice that comes from the ancient church that has been misaligned. The practice of confession. Now, confession is not self-punishment. Confession is agreeing with God about what needs healing. That's all confession is saying the same thing as God. That's actually what the word means, to say the same thing. It's agreeing with God about what needs healing. Gratitude becomes the counter practice. Gratitude restrains desire. It reminds us that we're already held, we're already provided for, and we're already loved. Because we are salt and light, we know that this is not a private project. This is why we stay churchy. Healing accelerates when hearts are not isolated. So this week, our challenge is this: 2 simple practices. First, confession. When it comes to mind, this week, pray simply this: Jesus, show me what's shaping my reactions. Name it without justifying it. Second, gratitude. Each day, think about maybe 2 or 3 concrete things that you're thankful for. Not abstract things, but real things. And watch how these 2 things work together to help us move away from the disorder. Move us towards healing. Confession, asking God to show us where we're misaligned. And having the courage to say, yeah, you're right, I am misaligned. And then thinking about what we're grateful for. What happens at the end of this is a presentation of who God really is. So as we move back to worship, if you're in a place where you'd like prayer for any of these things, if you have conflict that's unresolved, if you have anger and resentment in your heart, if you're struggling with misplaced desire, or if you're in a place where just saying yes or just saying no is difficult, we would love to pray for you. And so I'm going to invite the prayer team to come forward. If you're on the prayer team, you can start coming on up for this. But as we close in worship, if any of these things are landing, I would invite you to come up and receive prayer for that as we worship.